Well, hello. It's time for another amazing edition of The Way of the Blade. Yes! Guess what we're going into? Judges. If y'all haven't read the book of Judges, come on now. It's literally one of the most exciting books you could ever read. You know what's the best part about it? You're reading history. Like the actual reality of what happened in the world took place, and it's right here documented for you. And, you know, it's way more invigorating than any superhero flick you've ever seen. And I know they've got some marvelous special effects, but I read somewhere else, marvel not. Because Hasatan, the adversary, the dragon, that devil of old, masquerades like an angel of light. Don't fall into his snare. The book of Judges is the real biblical awesomeness that you wanted to experience when you were growing up, but you kind of maybe read those stories. Maybe some of you have all read these before, and I'm super enthused. This is obviously like the textbook Samson characters, the Gibor, the mighty men of valor, the people who do some crazy, incredibly powerful things, and most everybody else just saw them as dudes or dudettes until that moment. Much like you, dude or dudette, who I'm talking to right now. Listen, I'm trying to stir up to your remembrance these things. I talk to you guys about some of the same things regularly because we need to remember the stories of old that maybe were discarded and left back in the dusty corner of our shelves. But today, I'm going to dive in, y'all. Today, I'm reading out of the Hallelujah scriptures because, like I've told you guys before, they're the first translation I've ever found that has the English with the parallel Hebrew Bible right next to it for the Tanakh, the Old Testament, as well as the Renewed Covenant, the New Testament. And I love it because I'm literally beginning to learn how to say and understand, but also read these words. And you know what's great is you figure out that a lot of the other translations that you've been reading totally mistranslated words. And I'm sure they did in here too. But what's fantastic is I also have a dictionary, and I'm able to look at the words from Hebrew into English and see if maybe those were the best words that they could have used. But one of these that I found in Judges chapter 3, in absolutely one of my favorite left-handed assassin stories of all time, I realized that every translation I've ever read until now was wrong. I'm super excited to tell you what I found. But before we get there, we're going to have to talk about a test, a trial that's taking place for each and every one of you, and is taking place back then, and it's going to happen again and again and again. Check this out, y'all. Judges, or Shaphatim. I'm sorry, I'm working on it. Judges chapter 3. And these are the nations which Yahuwah left to try Israel by them, to test them. Yahuwah literally left bad guys all over to test his people. Just think about this for a second. This is the land of their inheritance. This is just after the book of Joshua, right? Yeshua. It's literally supposed to be the book of salvation where the people enter into their inheritance. And instead, it's a book about now the judges. Because the people, you'll see, are about to fail the test utterly. And I've definitely failed these tests plenty of times in my life because I've come up against those things or spiritual powers, people or persons in my life who Yahuwah brought in or left there to test me and to test you. And I think many of us have failed those tests at times in our life. But you know what's beautiful? Is our Father has loving commitment towards us, also known as mercy, loving compassion towards you and towards any of us when we cry out to him. Check this out. And these are the nations which Yahuwah left to try Yasharel by them, all those who had not known the battles in Canaan, meaning the people who didn't go through all the fights and the wars in order to take the land of their inheritance with Joshua. It says, only that the generations of the children of Yasharel might know to teach them battle. He literally left bad guys in the room so that you could learn how to fight. Only those who before them that did not know them. This is literally how he leaves the snares around you so that you can learn how to evade them and or escape them. Check this out. 5 princes of the Pelishtites and all the Canaanites and the Zidonians and the Hivites who dwelt in Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon to the entrance of Hamath. Baal Hermon, you guys, Mount Hermon is literally the place where the watchers, the sons of Elohim, angels, people call them, specifically a class of angels that descended in the days of Jared on Mount Hermon. and they took wives, women. They lusted for the ladies, and they took them, and they taught them sorceries and divinations, and they taught mankind the secrets of heaven. You can learn a lot more of this in the book of Jubilees. It's a really, really incredibly instructional book, and it would behoove you to learn about it. Anyways, you can learn about this in the books of 1st Enoch and Jasher. Also incredibly helpful historical text to look into, y'all. But this is literally the epicenter of where those watchers came down and infected the earth with their mind games, with sorceries, divination, war, bloodshed, on a totally different scale. This is where, like, radical intelligent evil literally mingled itself with man and corrupted the image of mankind and made it like all those superhero Marvel movies you're seeing. Like that. They did that stuff. They're basically telling you their story again. But Yahweh's got his own story. Those were just supposed to be the bad guys to test us and to teach us how to fight, y'all. Check this out. They were to try Israel by them, to know whether they would obey the commands of Yahweh, which he had commanded their fathers by the hand of Moshe. If any of you raise children out there, or even if you raise children out there, y'all, some days you just set them up. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, there's days where I leave a mess on the ground for Naomi. Like, I leave a mess, and then I ask her to go clean it up. Do you know what I mean? I set her up. You know what I mean? I don't ask her directly at the time that I do it, but I asked her previously, hey, if Naomi, you come into the house and you notice there's a specifically big mess on the ground, could you take the time to pick it up? I'm testing her. Other times, we used to do this with animals and livestock and stuff. You test them and give them opportunities to see whether they'll do good. Like, sometimes we take care of tiny little baby animals, like baby chickens or baby turkeys, and it's super fun. And you have to test them to see whether or not they're actually physically ready to take on the responsibility of caring for another creature's life. Will they give it water? Will they feed it? Will they nurture it? And will they protect it, or will they neglect it and abandon it and leave it behind? I always have that big desire for my family as they're getting older to teach them, like, hey, here's how you can process vegetables with mom in the kitchen. Here's how I can show you how to carve wood with dad. Like, I want to teach them the way of the blade. Do you know what I mean? I want to teach Naomi how she can take a tool and use it to do great things. But then sometimes I give her a butter knife and I see how she does with it. I don't test her all the way with, like, full-on serious machete swinging awesomeness, but I see how she does with the little things. And that's a super good way to find out whether or not people are ready. And all of our life, you guys, every single one of us, we are here for this test. We're here to be tested about what we choose to do. Like, our choices matter. Way more, though, so than, like, invite Jesus into your heart and you will be saved kind of choices. We're talking about every single day choices. Whether or not you believe on who the Father says he is and who his Son says he is, and whether or not you're going to do what they said to do. Like, it's really important whether or not you just believe something and whether or not you do it, because they're different. You can have a statement of belief, but if you don't walk in it, people don't believe you anymore. That's called insincerity, right? You're incongruent. You don't match your talk with your walk. Do you know what I mean? And each of us has to make a decision every single day. How then we want to live? How do we want to love our neighbors? Do we want to love Yahweh? Do we want to take care of each other and nurture each other? Like in the book of Jubilees, it talked about Abram, right? The father of our faith. It mentions at times in, like, the book of Genesis how he was, you know, always looking after people that were coming across his land. Like 3 people showed up randomly one day while he was sitting at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. We're also going to read about someone else who's sitting in their palace at the heat of the day. But Abram saw some messengers walking by, and he recognized them as mighty ones. Check this out. Let's just go there real quick, shall we? Are you ready for this? Bereshit, Genesis chapter 18. And Yahuwah appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre. Terebinth trees. Just for what it's worth, y'all, trees are amazing. You should live under them. You should look into being a sojourner so that you could end up living under trees. I have a super serious, deep desire in my life all the time to live under the shade of a tree. Even if it's the winter, because they drop their leaves and then you get the sunlight from the sun and it's wonderful. Or evergreens, which are great windbreaks. If you guys don't know it, plant evergreens on the northerly, colder winds that come in during the winter. There'll be a wind block for you. You could hide and shield your house from those fierce, intense winds, which will plummet your temperatures like tremendously. Most people used to plant trees around their property, some that didn't lose their needles, called evergreens, during the winter so they could slow down that super cold wind. But then south on that like more intense, blazing, brutal summer heat of the day sun, they'd have hardwood trees that would grow leaves and they would fall off during the fall. And then that just like my tripod here is falling off here. Those leaves would fall off during the fall so that way the sun could then warm up the house during the days of the winter. Incredible. You guys could be smart about this, engineering your life. Abram clearly chose trees to live under, like oak trees, which are delicious and they drop acorns that your animals can eat and you can too. Anyways, check this out. So he lifted his eyes and looked and saw 3 men standing opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground and said, Yahuwah, if I have now found favor in your eyes, please do not pass your servant by. Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Check this out. Yahuwah is in the flesh here. So who is that? You ever heard about the Torah made flesh? Who made his dwelling among us, who tabernacled with his people? Yeshua. This is literally what you would say is Yeshua, because Abraham bowed and worshiped him. Every other righteous angel or messenger that shows up in the scriptures, if a dude bows before him, the angel, messenger, rebukes him and tells him, stand up. Like the Apostle John, mighty John, Yohanan, like the man. He sees an angel and is standing in front of him, falls on his face when he sees him. And he's like, hey, I'm a co-laborer with you. Get up. But when Abram here falls on his face and literally calls this one of these messengers, Yahuwah, he doesn't rebuke him because it's Yahuwah in the flesh. Check this out. Abraham is going to show you about the gift of hospitality like nobody else. And so is Sarah, his wife, who's a super Milanite. Ready? And let me bring a piece of bread, fresh milled flour bread, and refresh your hearts, and then go on, for this is why you have come to your servant. And they said, do as you have said. So Abraham ran into the tent to Sarah. He ran. Nobody ever talks about Abraham running, but he's running with hospitality in his heart. Hurry! Make ready 3 seahs of fine flour. Knead it and make cakes. Question. Everybody talks about, there's a great book out there for many reasons called Nourishing Traditions, which talks about the old ways of people doing food and nutrition. And there's some tremendously valuable things in there. One of my favorite resources, Chelsea and I use it frequently, especially when we're trying to learn how to do fermented foods, like incredibly good for your body to do fermented foods. However, I'm absolutely certain that not every single culture through antiquity was fermenting and lactating everything in order to get these fine nutrients out of it. And here's how I know phytic acid and the whole fear a lot of people talk about, there's some fallacious information in Nourishing Traditions when it comes to phytic acid in our grains. And they literally get it completely wrong, saying people would stand grain heads up in the fields to allow them to start fermenting overnight. No, they didn't. They did that so that water wouldn't saturate the grain and it could dry out. Really fundamentals. Phytic acid, they say, is an anti-nutrient and it leaches nutrients out of your body. Not accurate at all. Poor information. Analyzed a study that did not actually extrapolate the data fully. Chelsea and I may have went and met with Brad Becker recently. Literally, Sue Becker. And we asked her this question in person. Maybe I'll just roll that clip in right now so you guys can get the answer from her lips.
I think because bread just keeps getting attacked.
Yeah.
So first, in the early 1900s, bread was denatured, altered, took the Brandon germ out. That's all the life of the seed, left you with white flour. So then we're sick. 90s, whole grains kind of started making a comeback, of course. So the food industry capitalizes on it with deceitful whole grain bread. And so when people saw, that didn't really work, then the whole anti-gluten, anti-grain, and That one was really big. Phytic acid was a big thing for a while.
How do you handle that? That was one of our big questions. We get that one all the time.
Okay, have you read my paper on it?
No, not yet. Okay. She was just in the car trying to read up on it, and we were wanting to. We get that asked constantly.
Yeah,
and what about the phytic acid? And isn't that harmful to us? And if whole grains have that, like, how do you counter it, or how does? Yeah. What's the deal with it?
Yes, that's that's gonna poison us.
Yeah, so phytic acid is actually a powerful antioxidant, and it's really the information that people kind of jumped on. It started with Sally Fallon, and then Jordan Rubin jumped on the bandwagon and just really promoted it a lot. It's based on some information from the 1940s, a Dr. Howell, because actually when I was taking a nutrition class with Trinity School of Natural Health, I had to read a book by Dr. Howell on enzymes. And the very quote in Jordan Rubin's book, he didn't really credit with Dr. Howell, but Dr. Howell said it. Anyway, it's old, outdated information that phytic acid binds heavy metals. Yes. It does, and so that's a good thing. You want it to bind and take
metals out of your body
out and chelate out. And so the thing is, well, then it can chelate out calcium and magnesium and some of these vital minerals. But there's enough vital minerals in grains themselves that's not really an issue. If you were super digestion compromised, perhaps, but your gut organisms that should be in there make phytase, which will break that phytic acid down. But so, you know, all this about soaking grains and all of that, and sprouted grains, I don't think that was ever done. Sourdough, yes, helps break some of that down, the longer, slower rises, but I've had my calcium and minerals checked over the years, and I've never, ever been deficient.
Yeah.
Ever. In iron or any. Well, once with iron, but only when I had cancer. So, you know, and was really had an infection pretty badly. So, but that was the only time. And that wasn't from the bread. So it was funny when all of that phytic acid stuff was coming out. And I do believe in longer, slower rises.
Like the overnight rise? Or
well, not even the overnight, just longer, slower rises. The yeast feeding, whether it's sourdough or whatever, the yeast feeds on the wheat and it produces nutrients, and it makes nutrients available that wouldn't be available if you didn't have that long, slow rise. But also, we know that people ate porridge, and people ate, I mean, the disciples went out in the field with Jesus, and they took it right out of the field and popped it in their mouth. I haven't figured that one out. I would love to know what kind of grain that was that they just chowed down on because they were hungry right from the field.
It's never been pleasant. Even soft white. You're like, she loves it. Our children eat it like snacks.
Well, now I eat oats. If you've ever popped some fresh oats and oat groats in your mouth, they're sweet and they're so good. Yeah, I love them. But anyway, so we know those things, and we know Southerners didn't eat. We don't eat yeasted breads typically. Culturally. Because that type of wheat doesn't grow here in the Southeast. So we're biscuits, quick breads, muffins, pancakes. That was the kind of bread, cornbread. So I just didn't buy into the whole thing that it had to be soaked and had to be all this stuff done to it. And I came across a book, Dr. Rex Russell, that wrote What the Bible Says About Healthy Living. I talked to him at length because he had a little paragraph or two in his book about phytic acid being a chelator. And he told me about this book, and it was, what was the title? Something for the Atomic Age. Diet for the Atomic Age. And it was written by a biochemist, did extensive research. The book was, the more toxic our world becomes, we need to be getting more and more phytic acid from grains and beans because it chelates this out. And the Chernobyl, explosion, the only people that didn't get significantly sick was this bakery that was this family that owned a bakery right there, and they were eating the grains and things. And it was just very fascinating book.
What a pertinent
She's like, 70% of your diet should be grains and beans because of the phytic acid that's there. And I'm like, I knew I liked this.
I knew it.
So that's kind of where I got most of my information from, and just that, you know, it's broken down and it's, God knew what he was doing. You know, and these anti-nutrients that they think are in grains, most of them are in seeds, and they protect the seed. Have you ever thought about why, say, like an acorn can fall to the ground in the spring, but then not germinate
for 6-7 months?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting wet, it's breaking down. That's phytic acid and some other things that protect that, to keep it so that it germinates at the exact right time.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So anyway, what we call anti-nutrients are super amazing protectors. And, you know, kind of like the cyanide component of most seeds. That's a incredible anti-carcinogenic that attacks tumor cells but not healthy cells. Yeah. And yet, so
it's targeted warfare. You know, it's our targeted warfare, and so that's what's targeted.
Jesus compared himself to it.
Yeah. You know, it's full of, it's only life, you know.
Yes, and that's another thing I tell people. You know, people talk about live food, and I'm like, well, technically, seeds are live food.
Absolutely.
Fruits and vegetables are dead. I mean, I get what they're saying about
within 3 days, those cells are dead, though. Yeah. You got about 3 days from fresh pick. That's it.
There's a reason God gave us 2 types of food.
Yeah.
Plants, I mean, fruits and vegetables, and seeds.
Yes.
Fruits and vegetables are wonderful in season. Seeds are your sustainable food that's just as nutritious forever. So, you know, whereas fruits and vegetables are going to rot, decay, you have to preserve them somehow, but grains and beans, you don't. They're there. Wow. And they're just as nutritious as they were the day you picked them, unlike, like I said, fruits and vegetables. So,
it's like his scripture, you know, it's there, and it's always, it's living bread, you know, it's a living bread that's always there. Yeah. And it's when people start trying to dismantle it and sift it out, portions of it, that it gets diseased.
Seeds are live. They can procreate.
That's right.
Orange can't procreate. The seed can, but, you know, those things rot. So that's why I'm like, if you want a true living food, living is something that can produce life. And that's what seeds are. So, yeah. Anyway,
thank you.
So, this is our mixer. That's the finest.
So now, that should give you a little better understanding of why phytic acid is not your bad enemy. Everything in grain is good and full of life for your body, especially if it's naturally grown or organic. Incredibly good and nourishing for your body. Even better if it came from nourished living soils, which someday I'm going to get into. Anyways, Sarah made a quick bread, which means it didn't ferment overnight, which means it probably wasn't the overnight sourdough. Do you know what I mean? It was like naan, which is the best ever. I love naan. I'm going to include Chelsea's recipe for naan in the description below.
My. What are we doing over here, Miss?
Getting exciting in the kitchen here. Ooh. With some naan. Homemade fresh milled naan. It's delightful. It tastes like a sopapilla.
If you don't know what that is, make one of these.
So good.
Put living honey on it. Booyah. And then eat it.
Oh, and that's Usnia drying out. Usnia.
Put that in hot water and drink it.
Drink it. It's delicious.
But it was quick bread, you guys, like tortillas. Because you need bread fast and you need milk fast. Don't worry, Milanites are on it. Check this out. And Abraham ran to the herd. He ran again, you guys, and took a tender and good calf and gave it to a young man, and he hurried to prepare it. Here's biblical children, young men, like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, crushing life and being an awesome stud for his family. Check this out. And he prepared it, and he took curds and milk and the calf, which he had prepared, and put it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. And they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "See, in the tent." And he said, "I shall certainly return to you according to the time of life. And see, Sarah, your wife, is to have a son." And Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. She's being a spy. Milanites are always spies. It's amazing. And Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I've grown old, shall I have pleasure, my master being old too?" And Yahuwah said to Abraham, Yahuwah, speaking through the mouth of this one in the flesh, that's him. Check this out. Why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I truly have a child since I am old? Is any matter too hard for Yahuwah? At the appointed time, I am going to return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah is to have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. And the men rose up from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them away. And Yahuwah said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? He literally is like, should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? In front of Abraham. You ever played that game? You want to hear a secret? Obviously, who doesn't? Definitely Abraham when he's standing in front of the author of secrets. I talked to you guys in an episode called The Way of Cain about the hay, the letter hay, which reveals things. And it's like the loud shouting, giant screaming warning, stop! And it's also the silent stop sign that's just sitting there saying, I talked to you guys about Yosef, whose name means the cup that dispenses life. Like literally, his name is what he did. Well, he got another name in Egyptian, which was called Zaphnath Paneach. And do you know what that name meant? The revealer of secrets. Studly. Every time people went to Yosef and they bowed down before him to get their grain, they didn't say Yosef. They said Zaphnath Paneach, the revealer of secrets. Because he figured out a way to store grain like a boss, like a mighty Gibor. Here is another revealer of secrets, known as Yeshua in the flesh. Check this out. And they said, since Abraham is certainly going to become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be Barak, blessed in him. For I have known him. That means he has a relationship with Abraham. He actually has a relationship. Every time you see the word known or knowing, you're talking about a relationship. And Abraham had a relationship with Yahuwah that was intimate and close. For I have known him, so that he commands his children and his household after him to guard the ways of Yahuwah, to do righteousness and right ruling, so that Yahuwah brings to Abraham what he has spoken to him. Abraham is keeping the commandments. He's doing the Torah. Because you guys, the Torah was given way before Moshe, because it was literally the Aleph Bet. It's the alphabet. The vehicle Yahuwah used to express himself to creation and through creation was given to Adam. He gave it to Adam. That's why his sons knew how to raise up a righteous offering and sacrifice. And why Cain, who knew better, didn't do it right. They knew then because their father was given the instructions. Adam got them. And he passed them down to his son, Abel, who was murdered by his brother Cain. But then his next son, Seth, he passed them on and carried them all the way through to Noah. And he taught them to his sons, who taught them to Abraham, because Noah was still alive during Abraham's life. Think about it. His son, Shem, definitely was as well. They taught him the ways of the instructions. And now he is doing what Deuteronomy commands you to do most diligently. Deuteronomy 6. Diligently teach these words, these instructions to your children. Diligently. Like that's your main job. Husbands, fathers, wives, mothers, friends, we need to diligently teach them to our children. That's it. Main job in our life. If we diligently teach them to them, we raise up righteous heroes like Ehud and Othniel, judges that will deliver people when Yahweh's people who are in bondage to those mighty Elohim, those other Elohim Acharim, they will be delivered when they cry out through the mighty people of Yahuwah, because he loves to work with his children, because he loves his children. And he likes to entrust us those little things like swords and knives and swords that come out of our mouths. Check this out. Verse 20. And Yahuwah said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very heavy, I am going down now to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I know. So the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood still before Yahuwah. And Abraham drew near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to act in this way, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Does the judge of all the earth not do right? And Yahuwah said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I shall spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, look, please, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to Yahuwah. Suppose there are 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all the city for the lack of 5? And he said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there are found 40. And he said, I would not do it for the sake of 40. And he said, let not Yahuwah be displeased, and let me speak. Suppose there are found 30. And he said, I would not do it if I find 30 righteous there. And Abram said, look, please, I have taken it upon myself to speak to Yahuwah. Suppose there are found 20. And he said, I would not destroy for the sake of 20. And he said, let not Yahuwah be displeased, and let me speak only this time. Suppose there are found 10. And he said, I would not destroy it for the sake of 10. Then Yahuwah went away as soon as he had ended speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. That's where the story of Sodom and Gomorrah picks up that most people are remembering and been talked about throughout their life. Those messengers, the destroyers that went to Sodom and Gomorrah, you guys, they went there bearing loving commitment. They had mercy and compassion equipped upon their shoulders, ready to intercede and deliver the entire city of Sodom and Gomorrah. There's 5 cities actually of the plains. They were going to deliver all those cities if they could have found 10 righteous people abiding there. And you know what Lot is guilty of? Not raising his children diligently to follow and guard the commandments of Yahuwah. And you see that in the fruit of the story of what happens with Lot and his children and how they cling to, and his wife clings to Gomorrah, Babylon, the harlot. They cling to those Elohim Achrim, those other gods, and the way that they walked. They clung to the other way of living life. But you know what? Lot was delivered because he had an intercessor. And each and every one of us, that's what we're here to be. We're here to be those intercessors. Let me tell you about another intercessor here. You ready for this? Let's go over to Judges. Back to Judges, you guys. Check this out. Thus, this is Judges chapter 3, verse 5. Thus the children of Yasharel dwelt in the midst of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and took their daughters to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their mighty ones. Thus the children of Yasharel did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and forgot Yahuwah their Elohim, and served the Baals and the Asherahs. Abraham, you guys, was a giant contrasting sign to Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 cities. If you read those other books of Jasher and Jubilees and First Enoch, you get a totally different, deeper picture look into what those 5 cities in Sodom and Gomorrah were doing compared to Abraham. Abraham just showed you the gift of hospitality, that he entertained sojourners, foreigners, the poor, the widows, the orphans, and the fatherless. He looked after them. That's what you were supposed to do on this earth. That's what tithing, your tithing was supposed to go to people that Yahuwah would impress upon you, the people that are poor and the oppressed, the fatherless. You're supposed to feed them, clothe them, shelter them, and look after their needs. If you see your brethren in need and you shut up your hearts of compassion, your bowels of compassion to them, that hardness of your heart is indicative that you do not have a right relationship with your father and with your neighbor, your brother. Abraham, he built his home, his farm, his property, so that the gates were positioned so that the sojourners and the travelers could come through into his land, into his vineyards, and into his orchards, and they could eat and sit in the shade and drink water, and he would give them clothing if they didn't have it. He would feed them if they were hungry, and he would send them away with silver and gold. He blessed the nations. He was literally the blessings of the nations. He was the embodiments. This is why when he went to go buy a field for his wife to be buried in, the people said, you are a prince of Elohim. We'll give you anything you want. Because his reputation as a man of righteousness, of right ruling, of mercy, and of hospitality went with him wherever he went. And he was blessed exceedingly. Sodom and Gomorrah was also blessed exceedingly, you guys. They had bitumen and salt. Like, the oil conglomerates of the world. They had natural resources that made them rich. Salt is one of the most valuable commodities on the face of the earth, still today, but even more so then because of the scarcity with which it occurred at the surface. They also had bitumen, which is tar, where you can get oil, like for, you know, torches and stuff like that. There's a lot of torches back then, remember? They had these resources in plenty there. And so it made them rich in commodities. And however, what they did with those resources was not look after the poor or the orphans. They shut those bowels of mercy up and they served other mighty ones. And those other mighty ones conspired with them to give them an idea so that any foreigner or sojourner that traveled through who was poor or destitute, they would give them oodles of wealth and riches, but nobody was allowed to feed them. No one was allowed to trade with them or take from their money to give them food. So they would starve to death, richly clothed and full of gold and silver. And it was corrupt and evil, and it was an abomination, let alone how they treated the angels, the messengers. They wanted to capitulate with them just like the watchers had done before so they could have giant offspring again. They wanted to be with the angels, y'all, not just be with the men and be with the men. You know what I mean? It was a lot more than just about homosexuality in Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a desire to corrupt the genetics so they could have Gibborim children, giant children. So Yahuwah judged them according to their actions, and he will do that to his own children of Yasharel based off of our actions. If we choose righteousness, and if we look after the foreigners and the sojourners, and we take care of each other's needs, like so many people, we have got to do that now through the Linen Railroad directly to literally clothe people. Like, it's totally different to consider all of these people walking around us are naked. They have clothing, but it's not real clothing. It's literally poisoning their body while they're wearing it. Like, it literally induces, you guys, when you're wearing polyester fiber on your being, go ahead and look up polyester fiber and how it can literally cause miscarriages. It causes poisoning to your body because your skin is an organ that needs to breathe, like this car is not doing right now. I need to breathe. You need to breathe. And our skins and our bodies were made to move and breathe and be clothed in these garments of praise. And Chelsea and I have been able to now clothe these people who are praying and asking the Father, if I just could have a natural garment, I would love to know what that feels like. And they get it in these packages that you guys each pay for each other's. Do you know what that does to them? They feel like they got clothed by the Father personally. And that's such a gift. He's the only one that can orchestrate those kinds of things. And he uses each and every one of you to do that. And we thank you guys for being a part of it and for him opening up for us the opportunity to even do this. Abraham was judged and blessed because he looked after people. Sodom and Gomorrah was judged because of the way they treated the strangers that traveled through there. And check this out. Israel is about to be judged for the way that they go after these other Elohim. Thus the children of Yasharel did evil. Verse 8, and the displeasure of Yahuwah burned against Yisrael, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan Rishtahim, the sovereign of Aram Naharaim. And the children of Yasharel served Cushan Rishtahim 8 years. And when the children of Yisrael cried out to Yahuwah, Yahuwah raised up a savior, Yeshua, for the children of Yisrael, who saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. Caleb, this is Joshua and Caleb. You guys remember the only two people that made it into the promised land during the wilderness wanderings that were over the age of 20. Othniel was younger than 20, clearly, but he saw his older brother Caleb stand up and do right ruling and taught him diligently how to walk in his ways. And he was blessed. And the Ruach of Yahuwah came upon Othniel, and he ruled Yasharel and went out to battle, and Yahuwah gave into his hand Cushan Rishtahim, the sovereign of Aram Naharaim, and his hand prevailed over Cushan Rishtahim, and the land had rest for 40 years. Then Othniel, the son of Kenaz, died, and the children of Israel again did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah made Eglon, the sovereign of Moab, strong against Israel, because they had done evil in the eyes of Yahuwah. You see that? Yahuwah makes our enemies strong, y'all, to teach us a lesson and to test us, which might be why there's so many enemies being made strong right now, because he wants to test many of us in mighty ways. And if we cry out to him and diligently hearken to his words, he will deliver us, no matter how mighty they seem to be. They're buying up all the fields. They're going to kill all of us and stomp down our doors and stab us and jab. You know what, you guys? Stop speaking about what they're going to do to us and start speaking to them about what Yahweh has done for us and through us time and again. Read the book of Esther in its entirety every day, as long as fear like that comes out of your lips. Replace it with the water of the word. Wash yourself with the water of the word, and you will be transformed and not be fearful of the Elohim Achrim, the mighty ones of the earth. Don't be afraid of them. Fear him only, and watch what he can do. Check this out. And the children of Israel did evil. Oh, verse 13. And he gathered to himself the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel. And they took possession of Ir Hatamarim. And the children of Israel served Eglon, the sovereign of Moab, 18 years. And when the children of Israel cried out to Yahuwah, Yahuwah raised up a savior for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a left-handed man. And by him the children of Israel sent a present to Eglon, the sovereign of Moab. And Ehud made himself a sword. It was a double-edged, an amah in length, a cubit, like the length of your elbow to your fingertip. So he makes a double-edged dagger, y'all, that's about this big. Handle included, most likely, which is generally the space length of your hand. Get what I'm saying? Meaning most blade lengths. Your body tells you the length your knives and your blades should all be. This is the way of the blade. Your pointer finger. Let me show you. Most of my EDC pocket knives are about exactly the blade length of my pointer digit finger. That way, I know where this is all the time because I've been using it for everything my whole life. My blade length on my normal everyday knife is almost always exactly that length, which for me is like 3.124 inches, which this is. And it gives me a nice little wieldy thing that I know where to put it all the time. Then when you go up in size, like for a machete, hold on real quick. Let me grab a machete. This is my machete. I've shown you some of this in other videos that I've done. This was given to me by a mighty man from Thailand. It has sapphires and rubies all throughout it, right? I made the handle out of live oak tree. Live oak is like the greatest oak I have ever been under in my life. I dream and live and hope someday I can pitch my tent or build a cabin under a live oak tree because they're huge. They're like wider than they are tall, and they drop down thousands of acorns in a sitting. And I just love climbing them. They're exuberant. Anyways, this, you guys see? Look at the length. You see that? This is like a cubit in length. And then if I flip it over, you get an idea here. There. So this is just a little bit bigger than a cubit. And you know what's happening? I'm realizing the end of it right there is just too long, and it nearly swings out of my hand because I filled the handle space with so many rubies, and they're super dense and heavy, and just, it overbalanced the machete, and it's really uncomfortable now. And so I'm going to have to cut off this bottom part. But it was my favorite because I put like an actual blue sapphire right there. Let's see if you can see it. Oh, maybe. Yes, there's a little tiny blue sapphire that I put there. It was one of my favorite ones I've ever found. But I can't wield it anymore. So, Ehud, the left-handed assassin, makes for himself a double-edged dagger. You know what's so cool about that, you guys? You can do it. Make your own. Make your own. I've made now 4 of my own knives and or dagger things over the years. I made one out of a file. I made one out of a classified material that was used in a jet engine turbine that's used for electricity production. And it's a super high temperature resistant composite metal. And I made a tiny knife out of it. And it's sweet. I have bigger blades of it. I just don't have a workshop that I can make more of them with it. But make your own blades, you guys. It's super biblical. And when people ask you, be like, it's in the scriptures, Mom. I'm trying to raise up and save Israel. Your mom will be like, okay, honey, go make a knife. Check this out. And Ehud made himself a sword. There we go. Double-edged, a cubit in length, and he girded it under his long robe on his right thigh. This is where to hide your blades. I had a video called Sneaky Blades and Where to Hide Them. I don't know if it's still up. Check it out if it is. And he brought the present to Eglon, sovereign of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man, and it came to be that when he had finished bringing near the present, he sent away the people bearing the present. But he himself turned back from the stone images that were at Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O sovereign. And he said, be silent. and those standing beside him went out from him. Did you guys catch that? But he himself turned back from the stone images that were at Gilgal. Every other translation I ever read just said, turn back from the quarries. They're at a place, y'all, their meeting place. They're literally worshiping their Elohim Achrim. Do you know there's a place called Gilgal Rephyim? Reference these pictures I'm showing you now. This is literally a house of the Rephyim, where people would go and worship those Rephyim, like the fallen ones, the children of the watchers. They would build these places like for worshiping their gods. It says don't go find out how they did that, y'all. So I encourage you not to spend too much time looking into all that stuff. He says learn about him, don't learn about the other mighty ones and how they worship them. He says don't go find out how they do it. But for reference, this is Gilgal Rephyim, maybe the very spot where a lot of this stuff took place that we're talking about now. Check this out. Ehud, though, did not worship them. He turned back from them. You ready? And Ehud came to him while he was sitting in his cool roof room. If you didn't know it, y'all, they had air conditioning houses back then, and they still do today. These are places, modern day places in Iran that are in desert climates where they have these things called wind towers. That's our modern English word for it. But literally it's a giant air conditioner that's passive, meaning you don't have to plug it in and pay a power company to turn it on. What they do is they would assemble these wind towers up high at the top of the building. And underneath, they would have cool flowing streams of living water flowing in like an aqueduct or tunnels underneath the foundations of the house. And what would happen is as the hot wind from the day would hit those wind towers, it would create high and low pressure systems that are different. And it would change the hot air from the top would come and move through the house and go out the other way. And it would suck up the cold air from down in the aqueducts and cool the house. They do this in palaces over there. They would design their gardens so that they had cool pools of water out front, shaded by trees, more trees, shaded by trees. And then they would open up the tops of the houses and it would create just the hot air alone, heating up the top portions of the houses, would draw up the cool air, and they would open the windows at the front of their gardens and it would draw that cool air in. They know how to cool themselves down, y'all, so much better. And it would behoove y'all to take a lesson from the air-conditioned room where this assassination is about to take place. Ehud is in that air-conditioned room with this man right now. Check this out. Verse 21. Verse 20. I'm going to read it. You ready? And Ehud came to him while he was sitting in his cool roof room. And Ehud said, I have a message from Elohim for you. So he arose from his seat. And Ehud reached with his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his stomach. And the handle went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the sword out of his stomach, and it came out behind. Then Ehud went out to the porch and shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. And when he had gone out, his servants came to look and saw the doors of the room were locked. So they said, he is only covering his feet in the cool roof room, meaning going to the bathroom. And they waited until they were ashamed, but saw that he was not opening the doors of the upper room. So they took the key and opened them and saw their master fallen to the ground dead. And while they were delaying, Ehud escaped and passed beyond the stone images and escaped to Sariah. And it came to be when he arrived that he blew the ram's horn, shofar, jubilee, y'all, in the mountains of Ephraim. And the children of Israel went down with him from the mountains, with him leading them. And he said to them, follow me, for Yahuwah has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. And they went down after him and took the fords of the Arden leading to Moab, and did not allow anyone to pass over. And they smote 10,000 men of Moab at that time, all robust and brave men, Gibborim. They killed all the Gibborim. Do you hear what it's saying? The mighty men of Israel, the ones who hearkened again to the voice of Yahuwah and followed the Savior, Yeshua, Ehud in the flesh right now. Ehud is the embodiment of the spirit of Elohim on the earth, and he leads them out of the mountains and the places where they were receiving the instructions, and they go down in the defeat in a moment, the Gibborim of the nation that was oppressing them. And not a man escaped. And on that day, Moab was humbled under the hands of Israel, and the land had rest, Shabbat, for 80 years. And after him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, And he smote 600 men of the Philistines with an ox goad, and he too saved Israel. Okay, real quick, Ehud's story is super epic and one of the most incredible ones. And I challenge each and every one of you that's got some artistic expressions within you, I hope you would draw these character stories out. Make you guys some graphic novels and make you some artwork that shows these stories so that your friends, your neighbors, and the people that come into your life, you have a message to give to them that's so awesome because it's true and it'll teach people about obedience bringing life. This, like one tiny sentence at the very end of this chapter, to me, is the greatest of all of them because it just casually mentions a dude. Did you check it out? Whose name was Shamgar. Shamgar. Who defeats 600 humans with a stick. An ox goad, you guys, is a stick, often with a tiny little piece of metal at the end of it, with a staff, which is why you should make a staff. Here's one I made. It's definitely not super big, but it's made of white pine, which is one of the most nutritional plants on the face of the earth. The white pine literally used to be the symbol for real medicine before all the sorcerers and the watchers inspiring and conspiring with men taught people sorcery and divinations through pharmakeia, pharmaceuticals that are poisoning you. White pine leaves used to literally be the symbol for like apothecary, medicinals that would heal your body. This is white pine. This is a staff I made out of it. It's incredibly fun to make staffs out of white pine. Super strong. The grains are really straight and it makes a savage staff. And I imagine the ox goad that Shamgar used that day was savagely strong. And I wonder if he made it himself. You know what? It doesn't matter. He used it on a regular basis as a shepherd, as a stud. Just living life, being a dude until the spirit of Yahweh came upon him, and then he did mighty things. You guys don't need to learn the ways of the blade the world is trying to teach you. Learn the ways of this blade. And then at any given time, no matter what kind of tool is in your hand, that could be the exact tool that is custom catered and needed to deliver the people of Israel. I'm telling you, because if you're a rock hounder and you like finding rocks to the glory of Elohim and you share these stones of testimonies with others, that can literally be the thing that Yahweh raises up to deliver the nations with. Just your love of rocks and sharing the testimonies of Yahweh to everybody you can. Just that. He can use anything, any desire and trait and gifting that he gave you to deliver the world from the bondage of these Elohim that are poisoning us to death. He is mighty to save, and he is quick to deliver all of those who cry out to him. So I encourage you all, be dangerous. Live it. Seriously, live dangerously by knowing this word and by loving your neighbor extravagantly and being hospitable to everyone you can. Because you know what? You might just need to save one person's life today by giving them a good word of life, by feeding them an actual piece of bread for the first time in their life. Live dangerously, y'all. I mean it. Because the days may be evil, but you were born for such a time as them. I love you all. I'll talk to you soon.